Now there's something has gone wrong here.
Oh, is something gone wrong? What is it?
Let's hear Anthony speak. Can Anthony speak?
Anthony, will you say something?
Yes, I had a little bit of a glitch there, but can you still hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, fine. So the truth is that you can never guarantee that the technology is going to work. The internet can drop at any moment. But I would just ask people.
Sorry, Anthony. I'm sorry. The sound is really poor.
Well, maybe...
I don't know what other people think.
Mine's okay.
Yeah,
hearing very well. We're fine.
I think people are hearing it fine. I think people are hearing it. In which case we'll carry on. In the event that the internet drops or something, then don't worry. Please don't run away. I will come back as soon as I can. Sometimes it takes a minute or two, but we'll work it out. Okay, so thank you so much to Ellie for inviting me back onto the shir. The truth is that actually the last time I spoke in Bet Knesset HaNasi was pretty much the last public shirim that I gave before everything closed down at the end of February. I spoke with you in the middle of February this year. It seems like last year, but now we're on Zoom. Be'ezrat Hashem, I really hope and pray that by sometime approaching maybe next Pesach, Yom Ha'atzmaut, something like that, we'll all be together again in Bet Knesset HaNasi. I really would like that, and we can I think aim for and hope for that. But in the meantime, we're here on Zoom, which actually presents enormous amounts of opportunity. There's shirim that I'm Baruch Hashem giving in Australia, in Los Angeles, and these are places that obviously you can't just jump on a plane easily, even when the planes are going and get to. So this is a great opportunity, and I'd like to talk to you today about a topic which is not directly Hanukkah related, but actually Hanukkah throws out these questions that we need to focus and clarify. What do I mean? So the whole sugya, the whole discussion of the nature of rabbinic law, of mitzvahs d'Rabbanon, and the psak and the rulings of the rabbis of Chazal, it is raised in the Gemara in Shabbos in terms of Hanukkah. I didn't bring the source on the sheet, but I'll share the sheet in a minute. But if you recall there in the Gemara, it says, what bracha do you make on Hanukkah candles? Asher kiddishanu mitzvah vitzvanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. So the Gemara says, vitzivanu. Where did God command us to light Hanukkah candles? Hanukkah was hundreds and hundreds of years after the Tanakh was closed and 1,000 years after Chumash. So how can you say Vitzivanu, God commanded us, not one of the Tariq mitzvahs? And the Gemara answers quite famously because of the mitzvah of Loisosa, the mitzvah not to deviate from the words of the rabbis, that the words of the rabbis are emes, and therefore we have a mitzvah, perhaps even two mitzvahs, or even more, which is not for now, to follow them. Many years ago, when we talked about Das Torah in Bet Knesset HaNasi, we went through that in some depth, and we looked at the issue of rabbinic authority and where it comes from. So Hanukkah, if you like, turns our mind to this, both halachically and also hashkafically, the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you like, gives us this world with which we can develop and adapt and process in order to produce something which was better than what was there originally. What do I mean by that? Again, there's quite a well-known midrash in Tana Debei Eliyahu that God gives two servants, the king gives two servants each a bag of wheat and a bundle of flax. And he says, I'm going to come back in a couple of weeks and see how you're getting on. One of the servants does nothing to it and just leaves it. And when the king comes back, he has a bundle of flax and a bag of wheat. And the other servant turns the wheat into fine flour and the flour into pastry and the flax into linen and the linen into a tablecloth and presents the king with a beautiful smorgasbord of pastries and etc. And that is brought as a mashal there by Chazal, that this is what Torah Shebaal Peh is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us Torah Shebechtav, he gives us the written law, if you like, in a raw, unmanufactured format. It's just wheat and flax. We have to do with it what we can, and if we're able to turn wheat and flax into linen and pastries, then that obviously is the desired result. Hanukkah obviously alludes to that in a very significant way, in the sense of the Or Haganuz, the Or HaTorah, the light, which is hidden inside an olive. So an olive grows on a tree, beautiful, it's a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if we process the olive and squeeze the olive, inside the olive, unbeknownst to anyone who wouldn't have thought of this, is light. Light exists within the olive, and we can make that light real. And that light, of course, is the light of Torah Sheba'al Peh that we squeeze, if you like, out of Torah Shebichtav. So the question that I want to address today is really how we relate to this idea of rabbinic truth. The rabbis have multiple opinions. The Torah does not speak in multiple opinions. It gives one opinion. So all of a sudden, when we're faced with rabbinic ideas, we have to process this idea that there are multiple different perspectives. Which one is right? How do I know that I'm following the correct opinion? How do I know that God agrees? Doesn't that seem like a strange question, but this is a question which is addressed in a few places in the Gemara. How do I know? How can I be confident that HaKadosh Baruch Hu agrees with what the view that I'm taking? If I'm wearing tefillin that look this, and this, and this, how do I know that God is not looking down from Shamayim saying, "Oy vey, what's going on? They're wearing black, square leather tefillin. I intended them to be pink, fluffy, and round, and look what's going on here." The truth is that with tefillin, I all through history, every pair of tefillin we ever dug up archaeologically has been black and square and leather. So I wouldn't worry too much about wearing the wrong tefillin. And that, of course, is also halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which may be a little bit different. But in the issue of rabbinic law and interpretation, this is what I want to look at with you today. I called the shir here 3 rabbis, 6 opinions. I've shared my screen just now. I hope that you can see the shared screen. And I want to look with you at about 14 or 15 sources, some of which are well-known, some of which are far less well-known, and really give us a little bit of an approach to how the Meforshim deal with this question. How do I know that my rabbi is telling me what God wants me to do? Okay. So there are 3 key Gemaras that we need to start with. Again, I think some of these are quite well-known. There's a Gemara in Chagig, Gemara in Erev, and a Gemara in Bava Metzia. Let's start with the Pasuk in Kohelet. The Pasuk in Kohelet says, right at the end of Kohelet, Divrei Chachamim kedarbonot. The words of the rabbis are like darbanot. A darban is like a cattle prod that you poke the back of the cow and the cow moves forward. So they spur us on, they poke us forwards. Ukemasmirot, they're like nails. Sounds sharp as well. Nituim, but they're planted, which is strange because nails are inorganic. You can't plant them; they don't grow. Ba'alei asufot, the lords of the gatherings, nitnu miroy echad, all given from one shepherd. So this is a very strange verse. It seems to be a number of different ideas all thrown together. That the words of the rabbis are sharp, but they're organic. They grow, but they're gathered and they're from one shepherd. What's going on? So the Gemara in Chagiga goes through this verse phrase by phrase, and I want to pick up on the last couple of phrases here. Ba'alei asufot. Again, the Gemara is defining what are divrei chachamim. What does it mean when we listen to the rabbis? So the Gemara says as follows: Chagiga Daf Gimel, number 2. Ba'alei asufot. Eilu talmidei chachamim sheyoshvim asufot asufot. These are the rabbis who sit in asufot, in gatherings. They gather together in groups, factions almost. V'oskim b'Torah, and they sit and they learn Torah. Halalu matamim v'halalu matarim. One group says tamei, impure, and another group looks at the same thing and says pure. Okay, completely the opposite. Halalu oisrim, one group says asur, prohibited, v'halalu matirim, another group says permitted. Halalu paislim, one group says invalid, pasul, v'halalu machshir, another group says kosher. Meaning they're all talking completely against each other. Says the Gemara, $64,000 question, Shema Yoma Adam, a person could turn around and say, Heich ani lamad Torah ma'ata. How can I learn this Torah? What can I do with this Torah? It's so many different views contradicting each other. Now, I don't think that the Gemara is simply asking a practical question, which is like, who do I paskin like? I don't think so, because that, the Pirkei Avos is already answered in the Mishnah. Asay lecha Rav. Find yourself a rabbi and you'll have one answer. If you ask 5 rabbis, of course you've got multiple answers. Why did you ask 5 rabbis? I don't think it's asking a practical question. It's asking a philosophical question. How do I deal with the reality that there are so many different opinions? They can't all be right. So the Gemara doesn't actually answer this philosophically. It tells you to relax. It basically says, don't worry, be happy. You see what I mean? Talmud Lomi brings the end of the pasuk. Kulam nitnu miroy echad. All of these opinions come from one source, one shepherd. One God gave all of these opinions. One leader said them. That's Moshe. They all come from Hashem. And it brings a proof text from the introduction to the Ten Commandments. Okay, the word kol obviously is extra. God said all of these words. He could have had without the word kol. So all of these ideas somehow are coming from God. So, okay, so good, that's nice. So what do I do? How do I deal with all this multiplicity of opinion? So it gives you two pieces of advice. Make your ear like a trumpet. Like an afar chesed actually is like a funnel, like a grain hopper, I think is the expression. You put in all sorts of stuff at the top and it funnels it down and it comes out of the bottom. Make your ear like that, meaning you take in a lot more information. Get yourself a good brain. Maybe you even have to pay for it. Get some tuition, go for some classes, get some good brain power going. Lishmoa, and then you will be able to hear and understand divrei matamim, divrei matarim, divrei osrim, divrei matirim, divrei poslim, divrei machshir. Meaning, it doesn't explain how it could be that all of these things come from God, but it says that you first need to get your head around the idea that you need to be able to hear multiple opinions. You need a kind of ear that can take them in and not just kind of close down and say, oh, it's too complicated, I can't deal with this. And you need the kind of brain that can categorize and put them in the right kind of, like a Windows, minimizing and maximizing Microsoft Windows. Microsoft Windows is a good marshal for this, meaning all of these different opinions, you open a new window. Don't close the window. Don't press the X on the screen because then the window's closed. Just minimize the window and have it whirring away in the background. And every now and then you need to maximize and minimize the windows, but you've got to have the brain that works like Microsoft Windows. Otherwise, you're really lost. So that's the first Gemara, but it basically says, don't worry, everything comes from Hashem. It'll be okay if you get the right kind of ear and the right kind of brain. Interesting. Okay. The second Gemara, I think, is better known in Eruvin, raises the famous expression, Elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim chaim. Let's have a look at it together. Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel says the following, Shalosh shanim nechleku Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. For 3 years, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel disagreed with each other. Halalu oimrim halacha k'moseinu, v'halalu oimrim halacha k'moseinu. This group said the halacha is like us. And this group says, no, the halacha is like us. And by the way, this was a real schism. This began to, the Gemara says the Torah began to become two Torahs. Shammai Torah, Hillel Torah, very serious problem, just after the Second Temple period. So they couldn't resolve it. So Yatza Bat Kol. So a Bat Kol came out. Bat Kol is some kind of intuitive voice from heaven. Why exactly it's not a Kol? It's not Nevuah, because they didn't have Nevuah. Why it's not a Ben Kol? I don't know if anyone's ever thought of this. Why is it not a Ben Kol? Why is it a Bat Kol? Why is it a woman's voice? So you could say that when a bunch of men are arguing, they just need a woman to tell them what to do, and then they'll be able to resolve the problem. That could be as well. But it's a Bat Kol. It's a voice that comes out and says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. Now, an interesting expression. Let's just zero in on this. These are the words of the living God. Elokim Chaim, or maybe you could say the living words of God. The word Chaim could qualify either Divrei or Elokim. What does it mean that the words of God are alive? That they're dynamic, they're moving. Mayim Chaim in the Torah means spring water, moving water, as opposed to Mei Mikveh, which is stagnant, gathered together. So the idea of Divrei Elokim Chaim means God's words are not just, you can't just pin them down. They're moving, they're constantly active, they're changing, they're morphing. And therefore, you can be right and you can be right. Different perspectives. But the halacha could Beis Hillel. The halacha, however, follows Beis Hillel. Now, that seems a bit strange. Why would you just paskin like Beis Hillel if they're both right? So the Gemara says, why would you then follow Beis Hillel's opinion if the other is just as legitimate? So the Gemara gives two answers, which I don't want to get into too much. Number one, they are relaxed, chilled, good listeners, calm, okay, and humble, and therefore they're good at listening to the other side. They have good bein adam l'chaveiro. They don't just preach; they practice what they preach. But the other answer, which is important, v'shoinim divrehim v'divrei Beis Shammai, but they always teach both sides. They agree with the idea of multiple truth. They uphold and perpetuate the idea of there are different opinions. Beis Shammai was more into closing it down, my way or the highway. Beit Hillel says, no, we have our opinion and we feel strongly about it, but we've learned the other guy as well. We've learned the other views. Not only, they put Beis Shammai view before their view. To tell you, we've really thought about this. We've really understood it. Tosfos says, you want to trust an opinion that's really thought through the other side. Because if they really thought through the other side, then you have more confidence that they thought through their own opinion, as opposed to just teaching their own views. So that's the second Gemara. This very important phrase, Elu divrei kim chaim, that they're both in some way coming from God. Again, it doesn't exactly explain what that means that they're coming from God. We're going to get to that soon. But the idea that there can be two opinions and they're both legitimate in this way and both divinely legitimated, then that's part of this whole framework as well. The third Gemara, which I'm going to read quickly because you've heard this Gemara before many times, is the quite famous Gemara. I know that it's a bit irritating when rabbis say that the Gemara is famous. It just means that they know it. But this one, actually, I really think that a lot of people will know. It's the Gemara about Tanur Shel Achnoi, this oven that they were arguing about, and Rabbi Eliezer was determined to rule that it was tahor, that it was pure, and the Chachamim and Rabbi Yeshua were determined to say that it was tamei. Exactly what the oven was, I'm not getting into now. It's a Mishnah in Kalim that deals with an oven that became tamei, that you smashed up somewhat, you cut it into kind of wedges and put it back together again. The question is that sufficiently broken to be mataher it, so it's now pure, or is that still not really completely broken and therefore it's still tamei? The case is not so important. But have a look here. You cut up this oven, this earthenware oven, and you put sand between the segments. So Rabbi Eliezer v'tahor v'chachamim v'tamei. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer tahor, the rabbis tamei. But Rabbi Eliezer gave every argument he could think of to convince them, but they did not accept it. He said to them, if I'm right, then the carob tree will prove it. Okay. The carob tree uprooted itself and ran 100 amas, around 50 meters up the road. And some people say, it ran 200 meters up the road. Now, the truth is, obviously, these are midrashic symbolic numbers, meaning I don't really care whether the carob tree runs 50 meters or 200 meters up the road. Either way, it doesn't happen to my carob tree, in Alan Shvut. But the point is that he did some kind of nes. They said to him, leave me alone. You don't bring halachic proofs from a carob tree. You want to learn, or you want to play nisim, okay? Okay. He said to them again the following: if the halacha is like me, the water channel will prove it. Okay. The water began to flow uphill. They said, you can't bring proofs from a water channel. Again, each one of these is a midrashic symbolic idea, different kinds of proof, not getting into it now. And he said to them then, so if I'm right, the walls of the Bet Midrash will prove me right. So says the Gemara, Hatu Kaisle Beis Medrash Likol, the walls started caving in around them. Ga'ar bahem Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua screamed at them. He criticized them. Rabbi Yeshua represents the Chachamim's view. Amalim, he said to them, if rabbis are arguing in halacha, atem mativchem, what's it got to do with you? You stay out of the debate. So no naflu mipnei kvodesh Rabbi Yeshua. They did not fall down any further in deference to Rabbi Yeshua's opinion. The loy zakfu, but they didn't go back up again. Mipnei kvodesh Rabbi Eliezer, because of kavod for Rabbi Eliezer. And rather enigmatically it says va'adayin matim va'omdim, and they're still hanging there. Some way that issue has never been fully resolved. Finally, he puts out his final argument, his pièce de résistance. He says, "Im halacha kamosi min hashamayim yochich." Okay, let's close this down, says Rabbi Eliezer. God will tell you that I'm right. Yatsa bat kol, oh, handy. Another bat kol comes out and says, "Malachem etzel Rabbi Eliezer. Why are you even arguing with Rabbi Eliezer? Shehalacha kamosi b'chol makom. The halacha always follows him. Always follows him." So Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Aragla Ba'ama, famous words, Lo b'shamayim hi. Lo b'shamayim hi. I'm not interested in listening to a bat call. It doesn't change my mind one iota. So the Gemara in parentheses says, "My lo b'shamayim." What does that mean, lo b'shamayim? Okay, this is just explaining that pasuk in Dvarim. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, shekvar nitna Torah b'Har Sinai. The Torah was given on Sinai thousands of years before this debate. Ein anu mashkichim b'baskol. We don't listen to a baskol. Shekvar kasavta bar Sinai. The Torah already has written in it from Sinai. Achrei rabim lahatos. Follow the majority. The majority is clearly against Rabbi Eliezer. So why would I even listen to any other view? It's God versus God. It's the Torah versus a voice from Shammai. And God has already said, this is what my opinion is, and you may not listen to a voice from Shammai. And therefore, as far as Rabbi Yeshua says, that's the end of the debate. In parentheses, at the end, the Gemara says, Ashkchi Reb Nassan Eliyahu. No, Reb Nassan found Eliyahu Hanavi, always a handy fellow to come across if you need a perspective from behind the paragud from Shamayim. Amalei said to him, what was God doing at exactly that moment when we said we don't listen to voices from heaven? Amalei, and he says to him, he was smiling for Amar and saying, Nitzchuni banai, Nitzchuni banai. My children have beaten me, my children have beaten me. He was shopping nachas from the Jewish people, a little bit like the idea that we said when the king comes and he says, what did you do with my wheat? What did you do with my flax? And one Nebuch Eved says, here's the wheat and the flax, and the other one sets out the smorgasbord and says, this is what I did with your wheat and your flax. So then the king says, oh, Baruch Hashem, that's great. Of course, Rav Amnon Bazak, in his recent Sefer on Torah Sheba'al Peh, called it Nitzchuni Banai because of this Gemara, the idea that we somehow have beaten HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this scenario. What does that even mean? I'm not getting too much into that now. I'm trying to share my screen again, but for some reason it's disappeared. 1 second. Let me try that now. 1 second. Yeah, here we are. Okay, so they're the three major Gemaras. Of course, you have a question. I'm sure you have a question, which is, why is it that we listen to the Baskal with Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai? And we did not listen to the Baskal with the Tanur Shel Achnai in Bava Metzia. And in one case, we listened, and the other case, we ignored. So it's not consistent. So Tosfos asked that question, and actually, by the answer, throws up the whole debate into something which we need to get into in more detail. So Tosfos says the following in Eruvin. The Im Timer, source number 5. Im Timer, if you want to ask, which you probably were thinking, my Shana, why is it different in these two cases? The Loi Kaimer and Kabas called Rabbi Eliezer. Why did we not listen to the bat call for Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? We rejected it, Lo B'Shamayim, but in Eruvin we did. Yesh Loima, it gives a few answers. One of them is Hasam Haite Keneged Rabbim. In the case in Bava Metzia with Rabbi Eliezer, the bas kol went against the majority, and the Torah says follow the majority. But here in Eruvin, Adarabba, on the contrary, Beit Hillel have a ruba. Beit Hillel were the majority. So when the bat kol underpins the majority and supports the majority, so then fine, good, I listen to a bat call. But when the bat call goes against the majority, so then I'm not going to listen. So now you're probably thinking, so if there's a majority, why do I need a bat call? Meaning I just follow the majority. The bat call's not saying anything. So the Tosfos anticipated that question. It says, the only reason we needed a bat call for Beit Shammai is Elamishum de Beit Shammai havu charifit. Now there's two important words. Charif. They were more charif. What does charif mean? Now, obviously, in modern Hebrew, charif means what you don't want them to put in your shawarma usually. But charif means like sharp. And here it means intellectually sharp. Beit Shammai were sharp to the point that they turned around and said, listen, we are the brightest of them all. We are the sharpest tools in the box. Beit Hillel, you're obviously very advanced. You're on the Sanhedrin, but you must admit, says Beit Shammai, that we've got the edge on you, and therefore, why on earth should we follow you, even if you're in the majority, if we know that you're wrong? Shammai, his name Shammai connects with Shemaiah, and Avtalion, who were his Rebbe, their Rebbes, and Shamayim. He says we can access Shamayim. We have a hotline, if you like, to truth in heaven. And I'm telling you, says Beit Shammai, we're correct. Surely God didn't want us to follow the majority, even if the majority is wrong. Says Tosfos, yes, that's the whole point. The Bat Kol came out and said, you must follow the majority even when the majority is wrong, whatever wrong means. And certainly against a minority. You can't follow a minority like Rabbi Eliezer. You have to follow the majority. And even if the majority is in some sense incorrect. So that's a very interesting point. And we have to analyze what that means. What does it mean that we follow an opinion even if we think it's wrong? Or even if there's an opinion that one view that seems to be more connected, which is telling us that it's wrong. So what I want to present to you really for the next 10, 15 minutes is two models. There's what you might call a pluralistic model, which says, yes, indeed, God actually said different things. They're both really right. In Shamayim, they're giving multiple opinions. We just have to plug into one of them and that one's going to work. The other one could also have worked. It's also good, but that's not the majority opinion. But that these multiple opinions are coming down from Shamayim, and that's good. That's one model. And another model is, no, there is one answer. We just have to try our best to get it. And if we don't get it, so we tried our best. And that's all we can do. Which we'll see soon the difference between those two and the different people that take those views. So let's have a look a little bit at what I might call the pluralistic model. Again, I'm not using the word pluralistic in a 21st century sense of multi-denominational, but pluralistic in the sense that there is more than one right answer. So let's have a look at this Midrash in Tehillim. Number 6. Amar Rabbi Yanai, lo nitna divrei Torah chatichin. The Torah is not given in chatichin. Chatichin means sort of pieces, sound bites. I think this is the same idea of Divrei Elokim Chaim. The Torah is more fluid, flexible, not so easy to just grasp. Al Kol Dibur Shehaya Omer Kodesh Baruch Hu LeMoshe, says the Midrash, everything that God communicated to Moshe, Haya Omer Memtes Panim Tahor, he will teach him 49 ways of seeing it to be Tahor, Umemtes Panim Tamei, and 49 ways of seeing it to be Tamei. Meaning God is giving Moshe Rabbeinu 98 different perspectives. Now, what's the magic of this number 49? So 49 is, of course, 7 times 7. This is a symbolic number. 7 represents the maximal understanding of a person in this world. 6 dimensions, 6 in space and 1 in time. Okay, so 7 always represents the most that you can get in this world. 8 is always beyond. The Maharal talks about this in many different places. So 7 times 7 is like 7 on steroids. It's just the very most a person could ever grasp is 49. That's why, by the way, when we count the Omer, the Torah tells us to count to 50, but we never manage to count further than 49. It's the biggest frustration. The most, if you are, in my view, what is the most frustrating mitzvah in the Torah? The answer is Sfiras HaOmer. Every year the Torah tells me to count to 50, and every year I get to 49 and they set me back to 0 again. And that's the point, that you never get to 50. You can't get to the 50th level. So the 49th is the maximal level. Another idea is Shivim Panim LaTorah, the idea that there are 70 different perspectives of Torah. It's the same idea. 7-0 is another version of 49. Okay, so God says to Moshe 49, 49. Amalafanov, Moshe says to God, Ribono shel Olam, I need some clarity. What am I going to tell the people when they ask me a shaila and I give them 98 answers? And that's a good question. If you ask a shaila to your local community rabbi and he says, oh, I'm so pleased you asked that, here are 98 different ways of understanding how to answer that question, then it's time for a new rabbi. You don't want that. You want yes, no, thank you. Okay? Amalek, God said to him, you want an answer? Oh, just follow the majority. Rabbi Matam Tame, if the majority of rabbis say Tame, so say Tame. Rabbi Matarim, if they say Tahor, Tahor. Meaning it doesn't really matter because both of these opinions are correct. But we just go with the majority. Now, of course, multiple opinions being correct doesn't mean everybody's opinion is correct. It has to be the Sanhedrin. It has to be someone qualified. You can't just walk into Boeing and say, my opinion is that you should rebuild your jumbo jets the way that I feel. Unless you're an aeronautical engineer, they're not going to, they're going to call security and have you taken out. So too, you can't walk into the Bet Midrash and say, oh, I think the Torah means this. If you're really clueless, Baruch Hashem, the Jewish people all have an opinion on what the Torah should be, even if they're completely clueless. I'm sure you've all come across people with very strong opinions, with very little knowledge. Okay, that's nice. Everyone feels that they have something to contribute, but you can't really take that seriously. But once it's a legitimate opinion, says this source, then it just, whichever one that the Sanhedrin go with, that's great. And the Ritva connects this to Elu ve'elu. Number 7, Elu ve'elu divrei Kim Chaim, says the Ritva. Shalu Rabbeinu Tzarfat. The rabbis of Tzarfat said, how can they really both be correct? They're saying the opposite of each other. The Tirtzu, they answer, and this Medrash, he quotes this Midrash Tehillim. God showed him 49:49. And God said, well, all of these opinions are fine, just the rabbis will decide. That will be their final decision. So the Ritva says, this is a beautiful idea on a drash level. But if you want to get Kabbalistic, there's a deeper reason even than this. And I think that he's alluding to what is later made more explicit by the Maharshal, the Maharshal of Shlomo Luria in the Yam Shel Shlomo says, if you look at it more Kabbalistically, you'll see it may not just be an issue of God giving different opinions. It may be an issue of the way that we perceive those opinions. And actually, I think this is a very important point. How does prophecy work? So we often think very simplistically that God just kind of zaps different people with something to say this, say that. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim develops in a very detailed way the idea that God actually is broadcasting on all frequencies, and the question is not who is God speaking to. The question is who is picking up. It's a little bit like the Sfas Emes at the end of Parshas Noach says, why did God say Lech Lecha to Abraham? And he answers, God said Lech Lecha to everybody, but nobody else was listening. Only Abraham was tuned in. So too, God is broadcasting. The question is, what are we picking up? What are we receiving? So look at what the Maharshal says. Hamukubalim kasvu b'tam bazeh. The rabbis have given the Kabbalistic rabbis have given a reason. The fishekol and the shamas hayu b'har Sinai. All the shamas were at Sinai. The kiblu derech memtet sinorot. It's not that God is necessarily giving 49 opinions. It's that every single person at Sinai is picking up on a different sinor. I'd say like that means like a channel. Everyone's receiving on their own channel. The heina kolot, and these are what it's meant by the kolot, the sounds. Asher shamu v'gam ra'u. And he answers now a beautiful question in Pshat. What does it mean that they saw, maybe not Pshat, but what does it mean that they saw the voices? Famous expression in Yisra, they saw the voices. He says, they're not voices. That's information coming down. Kolot is information. They're going online at Sinai, and they go online, you get these little 3 bars that say you're connected to the Wi-Fi, and it's the kolot are coming down their own channels, their frequencies, and they're picking it up. V'chal Yisrael roim et kolot, heina deot. Every Jew saw these voices, meaning the information, Hamitchalkot b'tzinor, and they were all divided into different channels. Kol echad ra derech tzinor shelo. Every Jew saw through their own channel. Lefi hasargasa, according to their understanding, their neshama. The kibba lefi koach nishmato, and they received according to their own spiritual strength. Ha'elyona rav ilua or pechisusa, higher or lower depending what it is. Zerachot mizeh, and each one was different. Ad she'echad yagia letahor, one heard God, and he said, yes, God said tahor, right? And the guy standing next to him said, no, that's not what God said. God, I heard the same thing that you heard, but I heard Tameh. The Hashlishi, and someone else, could hear something between, sometimes this, sometimes that. Rachok min hakatzot v'chol emes, and every one of them is true. And therefore, we need to think about this. What does this mean? That the reason that there are different opinions, according to this perspective, is that there legitimately are different ways of understanding this information. It is not chatichin, it is not sound bites, it is complex, it is moving, it is flowing. It is developing, morphing, and therefore each person's neshama picks up a different perspective on that. Again, it doesn't mean everyone's right just because they think this is what it means, but it means everyone has the potential, let's say, to be right and see things in their own way. And I brought you just, the fun diagram, fun pictures that people, look at, the duck rabbit and the old young woman. You've seen these all probably 100 times before, and everyone looks at this and says, "Oh, I can see the young woman, but I can't see the old woman," or "I can see the old woman, but I can't see the young woman." But one thing's for sure: if you look at that rabbit and you think that it looks like a Volvo, then you really need to see someone about that, because it's not. That's wrong. It's not an elephant. It could be a rabbit. It could be a duck. But it's not an elephant. So you need to, I can see you all looking at it now thinking, oh gosh, where's the young woman? Where's the old woman? But I'm gonna leave you to think about that afterwards, because they're there. So that's the, if you like, the pluralistic model. Rav Kook points out that actually all of these opinions only seem contradictory to us because of our limited human understanding, but actually from the God perspective, they're not contradictory at all. So he resolves it, if you like, in that way. They're all correct because they're really all the same. Okay, but that's something I don't have time to get into. Okay, let's spend 5 or 10 minutes on a different perspective. There's a lot going on here. You need to take this away and think about it. Rashi seems to go with what I call a monistic model. What does that mean? It's not that there's more than one right answer. There is one right answer. In Shamayim, they say one thing. We have to try and get it. And if we get it, good. And if we don't get it, so what more do you want from me? I did the best I could. Okay? I didn't say what God says, so I can't, because I'm not God. But I got it wrong. Have a look here in number 9. A couple of Rashis. Rashi says, on this Gemara, he says, make your ear like a trumpet. As long as you're doing your best. You're l'shem Shamayim. All the rabbis are trying their hardest. Listen, learn, try and understand everything. And when you work out which one is correct, there is one that's correct, then you have to fix that as the halacha. It doesn't mean they're all correct, says Rashi. There is one that's right. You just have to do your very best to find it. So too in number 10, I'm not going to read all of number 10, but he says when two rabbis are arguing, it doesn't mean, well, let's read one line. When two rabbis in the Gemara are arguing, or be'issa v'hetzer in a judgment, or monetary, or ritual, each one says, I think it's this, or I think it's that. Ein kan sheker. It's not that they're lying. They're not lying. Each one is giving their perspective. But then Rashi goes on to say, but they're not all right. And at the end, he says, Zimnin d'shayach haytimer. Sometimes that reason is the correct reason, Zimnin d'shayach haytimer. So it's not that everybody's correct. It's that you have to do your best. And as long as everybody's in it, l'shem shamayim, then that's the best you can do. The Ran, in the 7th drosha. Droshas Haran, by the way, is a fantastic read. It's very accessible in Hebrew, and also it's now out in English. I believe that ArtScroll actually published Droshas Haran in English, which is an amazing thing because no one had brought that out in English before. I haven't actually got a copy. I've got the Hebrew and the English, but the Droshas Haran are really fascinating. And the 7th drosha deals with this question. And I didn't bring you the whole thing. It's like 5 pages long. But he basically says the following. The way it works is that there's truth in heaven and there's truth on earth. The truth in heaven is the ideal. But the truth on earth is the best that we can do. We can't necessarily connect with the truth in heaven. If there are individuals that are able, through their great segula, if you like, to connect with the emes and shamayim, then good for them. But we can't paskin like them because most of us are not there. Where we are is the majority of the Sanhedrin, and if that's where we're holding, that is the very best we can do. Okay, we missed the ultimate truth. It doesn't matter. This is the truth that we can access. Many of you have probably heard the idea that when Mashiach comes, we'll paskin like Beis Shammai. You heard that idea? Some people have heard that idea. Why? Why will we suddenly go like Beis Shammai? What, for a change? Oh, we've had like 4,000 years with Beis Hillel. It's time for something new. I don't think so. Beis Shammai, why? Because we want something stricter? Not necessarily. I think the answer is because Beis Shammai, because the level of understanding will be raised to the point that Beis Shammai is now in the consensus, not outside. So then we can bring Beis Shammai into the picture because we've raised our bar so that now that includes Beis Shammai. And fascinatingly, the Rav Moshe Feinstein in the Igros Moshe, he goes down this view, takes this view, goes down this line. I brought you 4 or 5 lines from the Rav Moshe's introduction to the Igros Moshe. Really worth reading. He says as follows. First of all, he asked, who am I, Moshe Feinstein, to give psak? Now, of course, you and I know now, looking back, Rav Moshe Feinstein, without him, the 20th century would have been impoverished in psak. He was the Gadol Hador for so many communities. But he said at the time, like, who am I? And look at what he says. 11. And of course, he was young when he wrote this. I think the answer is as follows. Later generations of rabbis are obligated to rule in halacha. Even though none of us would have been considered worthy of psak in earlier generations. And we definitely have to be worried. Maybe we didn't get it right. He says, I'm very open to the possibility, says Rav Moshe, that I actually did not get exactly what God wanted on this particular halacha. And earlier generations would have been closer to that. I get that. And he calls this other phrase, emes lahora'ah. There's a different kind of emes. There's an emes for psak. Kfar Nema, on that it says, lo b'shamayim. If it seems to an expert Rav, after they gave the proper investigation, the varer halacha, to try and clarify the halacha b'shas or b'poiskim through the normal channels, he had the ability, he had the right attitude, Hashem Yisbarach, and he had the right kavanas. And then that rabbi, the 21st century rabbi, says, I think that is the psak. Hu ha'emet, that is the truth. Lahora'ah, as far as psak is concerned. And he's obligated to paskin that way. And look at these words. Even if essentially galia klape shamaya she'eino keina perish. Even though in shamayim, if you like, they're shaking their head saying, no, that's not the right answer. What can I do? That's what it means, divrei Elokim chai. He's taking the Rashi model, the monistic model. Because to him it seems that this is the right answer. The loy highest stira l'dvarav, he didn't think this was wrong. The kabel schar, and he gets reward al hayrasa for this psak. Af sheha emet eino keperusha, even though that's his perush is not 100% correct. Now, this is fascinating. Think of the implications of that statement. He's asking the following. He's saying the following. Let's say the rabbi says this food is kosher, and the food is actually treif. And in Shamayim, they said, this food is treif. It's treif food. And you ate it because the rabbi said it's kosher. So did you eat kosher or did you eat treif? So you ate food which the Rav Paskind was kosher, but you ate food which actually, as far as Shamayim is concerned, was treif. So what does that mean? Did you eat treif? So the Ran actually addresses this, and he says, well, whatever it means that you ate treif, yes, you ate treif. But the reward in terms of the schar mitzvah for following the psak and going, because the Torah has instructed the rabbis to paskin to the best of their ability, lo b'shamayim. The reward that you get for eating this piece of meat and following the psak of the rabbi far outweighs the if you like, the negativity spiritually of having eaten a piece of treif meat. At the end of the day, treif is what the halacha says is treif, and therefore, in a sense, when you ate this piece of meat, you did more good than bad. It's a very interesting analysis as to how that works. Of course, the Ritva would turn around and say, well, I didn't need to deal with this because the meat's kosher, according to both opinions, or different opinions are all valid. But Rav Moshe's, in this introduction to the Igros Moshe, is very, very much worth reading. I recommend that you take some time, maybe if you can, and read what he says in more detail. I only gave you 3 or 4 lines, but that hopefully shows that up. Okay, there are other approaches I don't have time for now. The Torah Tamima says that only one view is correct, but the others are Elokim Chaim, because they illuminate the correct ones. The Netziv says even incorrect opinions give us important halachic information, understanding, so they're legitimate if they're not, even if they're not right. Okay, so that's all in that model. Okay, so that's the end of that part, if you like. What have we said there? That elu ve'elu, rabbinic truth, multiple truth, can either work as, yes, they're all right, we just have to follow the majority, or one is right, but we do our best, and our best is actually good enough. Fine. I just want to mention two other things before the end of the share. We've got till 11:15, right? I think that's the correct fact. Yes? Okay, good. There's two other things I want to mention. One of them is a bit of a tease because I don't have time to get into it in detail. But the other place in Chazal where Elu ve'elu is mentioned, it's mentioned twice. Once in Eruvin, that we looked at, which is talking about halacha, Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, and it's mentioned once in Gittin about the Pelegesh Migiva. And I just want to throw this out for some thought. The Pelegesh Migiva at the end of Sefer Shoftim is a very peculiar parsha there. A man has a Pelegesh. She does something wrong and he throws her out, and she gets attacked and raped and abused and dies, and that leads to an entire civil war. But the relevant line here in Shoftim is, it says, Vatizne, look at number 12, Vatizne alav pilagsho, his Pelegesh did a znut, some kind of a negative, obviously znut's always negative, against him, a negative activity, and he threw her out. She went to live with her farm. Okay, fine. What was the znut? What was the znut? So the Gemara says in Gittin, number 13, as follows. It is now alav pilagsho. Rabbi Eviatar, Amar Rabbi Eviatar says, Zvuv matzah. He found a fly in his food, and he threw her out. Rabbi Yonatan Amar, Nima Matzala. He found a hair, and there's a debate. Did he find a hair in the food? Did he find a hair when they were having sexual relations? But one said the fly, one said the hair. Now, which was it? This was a historical event, so it seems. Which was it? It can't have been like both, or can it? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Aviatar found Eliyahu Hanovi. Here he is again. Amalei said to him, "My ka'avid kudshabrichu." What was Hashem doing when we argued about whether it was a fly or a hair? Amalei, he responded, "Asik b'pelegesh kiva." God was learning the same sugya that you were learning. Again, midrashically, what this means that God is mirroring our learning in some sense. My ka'ama, God was saying the following. Amalei said to him, what was God saying? He wants to know, is he right or is the other guy right? He says, no, not so simple. God was saying, Eviatar b'ni kachol. My son Eviatar says the following, that it was a fly. Yonatan b'ni kachol. Yonatan says something different. Meaning God is reflecting these multiple opinions. Okay. Amalei, he said to him, Chas v'shalom. God forbid. Mi ikasveika kam shemaya. Does God not know? Does God not know what happened? How can God be giving both opinions? So the Gemara Amalei says to him, both of these are the living words of God. And then the Gemara tries to harmonize. Maybe he found a fly and then a hair, and he found a fly here and a hair there, and he found a fly and he wasn't so upset. And then but this answer, Elu ve'elu, is a very different kind of Elu ve'elu. Why? Because when it comes to halacha, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, okay, there are different ways of looking at the halacha. There are different perspectives, like in any professional situation. Think about an eminent doctor, surgeon, and there's a case in front of them, and one doctor says, well, given these facts and this particular scenario, I think we should operate like this. And another doctor says, well, actually, my experience tells me I think we should operate in a different way. Okay, we understand. Elu ve'elu divrei Kim Chaim. There are different perspectives given the same data because there are different ways of looking at it. So too, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, I get that they can both be right. But if you're arguing, it seems, about a historical event, was it a fly or was it a hair? How can you say Elu ve'elu? How can you say, well, on the one hand, on the other hand, that's why Rabbi Eviatar says, Chas v'shalom. This is crazy, because they can't both be right, surely. And the Gemara tries to find a way to harmonize that they are both right. And this raises a very interesting question. Think about the following. Again, I haven't got time to go into it in great detail, but there's machlokas on many psukim in the Tanakh. How old was Yitzchak at the Akedah? So Rashi says 37. He brings all the psukim, he works out 37 following Seder Olam Rabbah. Ibn Ezra says, no, it doesn't sound like 37. How can he be 37? He's 37 years old and has that conversation about, Dad, where's the ram? It doesn't sound like he's 37. And it doesn't say it's a test for Yitzchak. And if Yitzchak's 37, then Rivka is 3. And everyone's had this question at the beginning of Pashas in Chayei Sarah. Really, Rivka's 3 and she's doing with the camels and the water, and then she's 3 years old. She sounds much more like 17, 18. So the Ibn Ezra says different shot. He says Yitzchak was 9, 10. Okay, so who's right? So you'll turn around and say, well, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. And the answer is you can't say that. How can you say that? He can't both have been 37 and have been 10. Maybe, I don't know if you can be two different realities. I don't know whether there's a quantum physics way of explaining that he could be both this and this at the same time, not getting into that. But Pashtus, he can't have been both. So either one is right or the other is right, or both are wrong, but they can't both be right. So this is an interesting kind of elu ve'elu. And even though I don't have time to get into the full detail, I want to point out to you that this is actually raised by the classical Forship. In number 14, I brought you a Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz. Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz raises his exact point on Eruvin, and he says, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, and he says, I get it. I get it with Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Different perspectives, different ways of looking at it. Look in the middle here, just start with me here. Mikol Makom Kasha, I'm on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line of the end. Mikol Kasha min Masim Shekvar Hayu. But it's difficult when we're dealing with things that happened. Kagoin Mizbeach, different people. One argues the Mizbeach looked like this. Another argues the Mizbeach looked like that. Well, they're not both right. They can't be. There was a Mizbeach and it looked like one or the other or neither. How could you possibly say that both are the living words of God? You can't just say go according to the majority. There was only one thing. And look at what he answers. Beautiful answer. Tosfos says, you're right. Everybody agrees that was only one thing, historically. But what is really going on here is one is looking at the pasuk and saying, that the pasuk is telling me that it should be like this. And the other is saying, no, the pasuk is telling me it should be different. And when it says elu ve'elu, it doesn't mean that they're both right. It means perush the mitoich hapsukim, from the verses. Yesh mashma'ut limidrash kamar ukamar. You can learn either this way or that way. Aval vadai loy haya ella be'inyanecha. But certainly only one is historically true. This is a fascinating analysis. I brought you here Rav Shaul Lieberman, who talks about historical truth and textual truth. But really, Tosfos Rabbeinu Peretz is saying something really fundamental. Whenever you see two Perushim on Chumash arguing apparently about something which happened, as opposed to halacha, they're not arguing about what happened because they can't. Because historically, there's one truth, which, by the way, we'll never access because we don't have a time machine. What they're arguing about is what we're trying to learn from the psukim. Meaning, without question, the verses are telling us about historical events, but the verses are not actually teaching us history. The verses are teaching us how to read the verses. And therefore, we can learn, if you learn that Yitzchak was 37 at the Akedah, then the Akedah has a very different resonance in the way we incorporate those ideas into our life than if you learn that the Akedah was with Yitzchak was 10. It's a different Akedah. It's a different kind of lesson. And therefore, we're not arguing about history. We're arguing about what do the Pesukim mean. Read again, if you want, that Rabbeinu Peretz. It's very important in terms of understanding what does it mean, elu ve'elu, when it can't, just logically, they both can't be correct. Okay. In the last 5 minutes, what I want to do is show you a couple of beautiful midrashic ideas about truth, which I think will take us to the end. Two, I think, very interesting agaditas. First of all, look in number 16, the Breishis Rabbah, says, when God created mankind, the angels ganged up against God and made chaburos, made groups against God. Mehem Omrim, some of them said, Al Yivra, certainly do not create mankind. Mehem Omrim Yivra, and some said, do create mankind. Chesed, Omer Yivra Chesed, the angel Chesed said, create man. Shehu Gomel Chasadim, mankind does great Chesed. Emes, Omer Emes says, Al Yivra Shikul Shkarim, don't create man because mankind is not Emes, Sheker. Tzedek, Omer Yivra, Tzedek says to create man, Shehu Oset Tzedakos, because he can do justice. Shalom, Omer Al Yivra Dechula Katata. Shalom says, don't create man, because mankind just argues. Now, what did God do? Ma'asa Kudshabrichu, what did Hashem do? Natal Emes v'hishlicha le'aretz. God took the angel of Emes, threw him out of heaven. Angel was thrown out, the angel of Emes was thrown out of heaven. That's why it says in Daniel, v'tashlech Emes arza. You threw Emes to the ground. Now the angels really went nuts. By the way, the Beis Halevi on Chumash gives a midrashic analysis of what does it mean when the Malachim argue with God. That is a code word, a code phrase for that God is about to do something that goes against the natural cause and effect of the universe. That you can read the Beis Halevi there. So God throws Emes out. The angels say to Hashem, my goodness me, how's it going to be? How's this going to be? How can you undermine your very throne? You are, Emes this is Olam HaEmes. This is the world to come is the world of truth. And you've just thrown truth out. The Gemara answers, the Midrash answers, Tale Emes min haaretz. No. Emes has to grow up from the ground. Emes is from the ground up, not from the sky down. That's why it says in Tehillim, Emes me'eretz titzmach. Beautiful midrashic idea that Emes, as far as we're concerned, is no longer in Shamayim. It can't be. How can it be in Shamayim? You can't get to Emes in Shamayim. Emes is now a value which is incredibly important, but it has roots on earth. It's a human Emes, and it's flawed in some ways. Remember, Kate said, Maragdim lifnei akala, what do you say if the chostan asks you, don't you think my kala is the most beautiful woman you saw in your life? So what's Emes? You say, well, now you mention it, actually. No, you don't say that. Kala na v'chasuda, Emes is to bring shalom. You're allowed to lie, to cheat people who are cheating you. If someone's trying to steal your money, you don't have to tell them the truth. You can lie to bring shalom. There are all sorts of ways that Emes is now gray because Emes is a human value. So too in halacha, we need to try and get the Emes, but it's a human Emes that we're trying to get. And the last Gemara, the Agadita, and I'll leave you with this beautiful story in Sanhedrin. I'm a Rava. I used to think there was no truth in the world. And I met this fellow, he says, his name was Rabbi Good. And some people say his name was Rav Tivyumi. If you gave him all the money in the world, he would never tell a lie. This is George Washington and the cherry tree. You know, a lie would never pass his lips. So this is the story of this fellow, says the Gemara. He once came to a town, this rabbi who would never lie. Kushta was called Truth Town. That's handy. No one ever lied there. No one ever died there. Unless it was their time. No one lied and nobody died. Nisbe Itztu Minhan, he married a nice lady from there, says the Gemara of and he had two beautiful sons, beautiful family. Rabbi Good, living in Truthville with a family and two sons. One day his wife was sitting in the bath, shampooing her hair, doing chafifa, preparation for mikveh that night. As the neighbor came knocking on the door. Where's your wife? So of course, Rabbi Good from Truth Town has to answer, she's in the bath preparing for the mikveh. But he can't. He said, it's not derech eretz to say that. He said, she's not home right now. That's not the right thing to say in Truth Town. His two sons dropped dead, says the Gemara. Don't worry, it's a medrash. Okay? The men all came to see. What's going on? People are dying? How come people are dying? This is a place where no one dies. Amalahu, he said to them, what can I do? I couldn't say my wife was in the bath. we're preparing for mikvah. So Amrulay, they said to him, we beg you, puk miatrin, please leave this place. You don't belong here. Don't bring death to us. We don't have death here. Please get out of our world. We don't need you here. Okay, right. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I shared my screen for that last little bit. Maybe, I'm not sure if I did or I didn't, but it doesn't matter. You can have a look on the thing. The point is that as follows. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does that midrash mean? Is there a place where no one ever lies and no one ever dies? Is there such a place? The answer is, of course there is. It's called Olam Haba. And the Maharal says that if you want to live in a place where no one ever lies and no one ever dies, you better live in Olam Haba. Because in Olam Hazeh, life is more complicated. I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to lie for tznius. Sometimes you have to lie for shalom. And if you want a black and white world, that's called Olam Haba. And wait till you get there. That's the Olam Ha'eres. No one ever lies there. No one ever dies there. It's a world without death. So all of this really goes to show us, I think, that MS is a beautiful idea. Someone pointed out he could have said she was in the bathroom without telling them why she was there. Okay, maybe he was just like, he liked a lot of giving full information, full disclosure. But the point is that MS is a complicated thing. MS in halacha, MS in meforshim, and MS generally. And, you know, this is hopefully a perspective on how we understand the rabbi's multiple truth. 3 rabbis, 6 opinions. And next time different rabbis say different things, maybe you'll think, oh, yes, that's maybe this Gemara, that Gemara, etc. But every single thing we've said here could be a series of its own, but that's all we've got time for now. So thank you again, Ellie, for inviting me to give the shir. I appreciate it. Okay, that's fine.
Rob.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Nice to see everybody. And
Can we ask a question? Can we ask a question?
Of course you can ask if I've got time. I'm not sure I'm allowed.
So the question, like with the 2 different experts saying this way you should operate or that way you should operate, it could be each one would come out right. There's 2 different ways to do this operation. Now, so they're derailing him. Yeah, there's different approaches in medicine, and each one has success on this. Okay, so that's one thing. Number 2, the historical facts. So isn't the problem that the Masorah got lost? Like if they're arguing how old was Yitzchak, this was passed down or this happened, and then that had to get over to the Rabbanim that passed it down to the next Rav. So there was a link, there was something, there was a sever in the.
I don't think you have to say that, because where do we get the story of the Akedah? We don't get it from Abraham and Yitzchak. We get it from Moshe Rabbeinu. When Hashem dictated the Torah, he said, write down these words. This is a story. We don't know if there was a Masorah that they passed through how old Yitzchak was at the Akedah. Maybe that wasn't relevant to them. What's relevant to us is now we have the text of the Akedah, and Hashem says, learn this text, because this text will change your life.